Have you ever wanted to break into someone's home, steal all of their valuable possessions, flee the scene by hurtling out of a 9th-story window, trade these stolen goods for hard drugs, enter a drug-induced psychosis, and take your anger out on the local homeless population? If so, then your doctor probably thinks you're mentally ill. I prefer the term visionary, and what better way to execute said vision than in today's game, Shadows of Doubt. In Shadows of Doubt, you take on the role of a late 1900s noir detective in an alternate reality where Britain won World War II. Everything in this world is coded beneath a deep layer of corruption and nihilism, and to top it all off, there's a killer on the loose. People are dying, and it's up to me to help them. Can I put the pieces of the puzzle together and bring this killer to justice, or will I become just another victim? Only one way to know. We began our new game of Shadows of Doubt by generating a city and character. Considering the filth caking the streets, the abuse of cops, and the unsettlingly large population of Eastern Europeans, I decided to base the seed for my city off its real-world counterpart, Los Angeles. I gave my character a fitting name for a detective, and with that, we begin. It's raining. Though it's always raining here in LA, God's attempt at washing away our sins, I suppose. Violence and crime are rampant, choking this city to death. Much like I did to that man I cheated on my wife with in Vegas all those years ago. I don't talk about it much, but it happened. I've tried to forget, but the way he made me feel is all I can think about. My wife has never touched me like that. I wonder if I'll ever feel that way again. We loaded into the world and took a look around. Based on my immediate company, as well as the fact that I have only $100 to my name, I realized that I am probably a homeless man. I attempted to socialize with my fellow street urchins, but after witnessing a small child quite literally quantum shift through a flaming barrel, I decided I do not like being homeless and set out to find a job. As I made my way through the city looking for work, I came across a corner diner. Inside the diner, I found a bulletin board with several job listings posted and began sifting through them. There was an offer to make an arrest on behalf of the police, an ad with an apartment for sale, and then an offer letter that was absolutely coated in what appeared to be seminal fluid, and based on the taste, it is inhuman. I wanted absolutely nothing to do with that and continued looking until I found a job that simply said, anger issues? Turn them into cash. It's perfect. For details on the job, I first had to talk to the diner staff. From them, I learned that my client wants me to trash some woman's apartment. Being the raging alcoholic that I am, I figured this was a better outlet for my anger than my wife, so I made my way to the destination. The client wants pictures of the damages and offered a bonus reward if I could provide them. I didn't own a camera, but luckily for my client, I had clearly just suffered some sort of traumatic brain injury because despite the bonus reward for those pictures not nearly covering the cost of the camera, I spent all of my money purchasing one anyway. I made my way to the address and knocked on the door. I waited a few moments for someone to come to the door, then bashed my shoulder into the door as hard as I could, slamming the door open into the young woman's face and sending her careening across the room. I took some photos of the woman's collapsed jaw, then began my task of trashing the apartment. Before I trashed the place, I decided to have a bit of a look around first and began rifling through her drawers and cabinet, when suddenly, I heard her wake up in the other room. I emerged from her office and began to punch the woman repeatedly in the skull until she crumpled to the floor yet again. After inducing what at this point I assumed to be a trauma-induced coma, and confident she wouldn't wake up for some time, I entered her kitchen and began smashing plates on the walls and throwing food on the floor. Yet to my utter disbelief, she woke up again after only a minute and sprinted past me into the hallway. I attempted to stop her and knock her out yet again, but she managed to pull the emergency alarm, activating the building's security system and causing the automatic defense turrets on the ceiling to begin shooting me. In a panic, I stumbled out of the building, bleeding profusely from my gunshot wounds, and began frantically running around the city looking for some way to stop the bleeding. I very quickly found a pharmacy and breathed a sigh of relief. I entered and went to purchase some bandages, only to find that they were $30 and, oh yeah, I don't have any money. Nice. Blood pouring from my wounds, I stumbled back into the streets and began frantically rifling through dumpsters, hoping to find anything I could use to stop the bleeding, but to no avail. On the brink of death, I finally found the hospital, where I spent some time getting my wounds treated. Surely all of this pain I endured will be worth the $250 I'll make for completing this job. However, things weren't all bad for me, as during my fiasco in the apartment, someone was murdered. And just like that, we had our first official case. It appears the murder happened at 701 Shang Towers. But before I headed there, I figured I should probably get paid for the vandalism job. It seems my client lives at 702 Shang Towers. That's one hell of a coincidence. I'm gonna chalk that one up to luck and move on. I turned in the vandalism job and got paid before sneaking into the crime scene next door. I found the victim lying dead in the kitchen, her body crumpled and contorted in an unrecognizable manner. It seems she had died between 6 and 7:15 p.m. and was stabbed to death, likely by this nearby box cutter lying on the ground. Also notably on the ground next to her was a spilled milk carton. Being the high-functioning autistic man that I am, I picked up the carton and began slurping it down as I continued searching the apartment for clues. I found a work schedule on the counter for someone named Brian, who I assumed to be her husband. Based on his schedule, he should have been at work during the time of her death, so for now, I ruled him out as a suspect. At this point, the milk I had been endlessly chugging had made me nauseous, so I stumbled into the bathroom and began vomiting profusely. My clothes were dirty, bloody, and covered in vomit, so I decided to pop in the shower real quick while I was here. I began dusting for prints and taking note of all that I found. After thoroughly investigating the home, stealing all of the valuable possessions, and ensuring the crime scene was properly contaminated, I'd learned that the victim's name was Annabelle Holmes, and she works for Mint Systems. To get more insight into her day-to-day and maybe find more clues about who the killer is, I decided to break into her place of work and hack her computer to gain access to her email. I made my way to Mint Systems, picked the lock, sprinted past the security cameras, and just like that, I was in. After disabling the security system, I began looking around the office, quickly finding Annabelle's desk. I opened up her email and found something very interesting. It seems Annabelle was having an affair with a woman named Piper Cole. To me, an affair spells motive, and I decided I should track down this Piper and ask her a few questions. I looked up Piper in the city directory and found out she lives at... No fucking way. Gentlemen, I no longer think this is a coincidence. I made my way to 702 Shang Towers and knocked on the door of my once client, now suspect. A woman answered, and after talking to her, I learned that she is not, in fact, Piper, but rather Piper's wife. In that instant, it all made sense, and a new theory formed. This murder was likely a crime of passion, brought about by a spouse of one of these two ladies finding out about their little affair. I thought about it for a minute, and considering the abuse rates of lesbian couples and the fact I was hired by this woman to trash someone's apartment, I'm leaning more towards the murderer being this woman than I am it being Brian. Deciding I needed more info on the residents of 702 Shang Towers, I broke down the door and attempted to knock the woman unconscious. Wow, she's really putting up a fight. Finally, after a long fist fight in her bathroom, I succeeded in knocking the woman out and began hurriedly searching the apartment. I found a concerning amount of injectable amphetamines, which probably explains the resistance to traumatic brain damage the woman had, as well as learned that Piper Cole works for the Azure Group. Once again, it was time to break into an office to gain more information. I made my way to the Azure Group and decided to sneak in through the ventilation system, dropping down into the secure back room. I opened the file cabinet and began rummaging through the employee files, and quickly learned that Piper Cole does not work here, and I am in fact in the wrong office. I tried to climb back out of the office via the vent, but it was on the ceiling and too high for me to reach. The door to this room is locked by a security code, and to make matters worse, the camera in the corner of the room spotted me and set off the security alarm. Understandably, this situation began to stress me the fuck out. In my panic, I decided the best way to escape was by leaping out the 7th story window, which sent me tumbling 5 feet before I landed on an air duct just beneath the window. Nice. I hopped off the duct down to another ledge, and then finally to the ground, landing injured but alive, and limped away from this failed attempt at gathering information. That brief fiasco in the wrong office wasn't all bad though, as I was able to snag an object called a sync disk, a cybernetic implant that can give me a permanent upgrade or ability when installed. This particular implant will increase the efficiency of my punches, allowing me to effectively knock the chromosomes straight out of someone's skull. I made my way to a sync clinic and got the implant installed. Did you guys see that? Maybe I'm imagining things. I made my way back up to Piper's place of work, this time making sure I entered the right office and logged into her email account. It seems that Piper really gets around, having affairs all over town. I recorded down the names of these women as they could be potential victims and... What the fuck? Was that real? I probably just needed to clear my head, so I decided to go take a nice hot shower and think about the case. Luckily for me, I knew a shower that nobody was using right now. I headed back to Annabelle's place and hopped in the shower while I began poring over the case. Piper's wife has a clear motive, and if she was really killing the women Piper was sleeping with, I should probably start by staking her out. When I got out of the shower, I realized I never pinned the killer's fingerprints to my caseboard, and quickly swept the murder weapon where I found a fingerprint belonging to... Okay, who the fuck is this? So, apparently, when I broke into Annabelle's place of work and read her employee file, I accidentally clicked on another employee's file and got their fingerprint data. Their name is Miriam Jenna, and their prints are all over the crime scene. Everything I'd been investigating up until this point was a complete waste of my time, and 702 Shang Towers really was a coincidence after all. Outstanding. Now that I had stumbled onto the real culprit of this murder all along, I made my way back to Mint Systems so I could have a little talk with this Miriam and potentially confirm my suspicions. I approached Miriam and asked her when she last saw Annabelle. She said she last saw Annabelle in her apartment at 6:30 p.m., which was Annabelle's time of death. This sicko isn't even trying to hide it. Before I left, I stole another sync disk from the manager's office, then set off to begin preparations to apprehend this maniac. My first stop was the sync clinic to install the sync disk I stole, which would apparently increase the size of my inventory. Seriously, you guys are seeing this, right? The plan was to wait for Miriam to attempt to kill someone else and catch her in the act. I purchased some handcuffs from Town Hall, then waited until she got off work, after which I began tailing her from a safe distance. I followed her to 403 Fitzgerald Center, entering the room just after her to find her assaulting the resident. Unfortunately, I was unable to prevent Miriam from taking this person's life. However, as I raised my fists and swung at Miriam, another person sprinted out of the room and joined Miriam in fighting me. It looks like Miriam has an accomplice. After running around and snapping photographs of the two at the crime scene, the accomplice got winded, which gave me the time I needed to knock Miriam out and handcuff her. Unfortunately, while I was busy with Miriam, the accomplice escaped, though I figured I could come back and look for clues about him later. I made my way to Town Hall and turned in all the evidence I had on Miriam, and just like that, the case was solved. Miriam was arrested, and I was able to breathe a small sigh of relief. I made my way back to the corner diner where this long night had started, and sat down for a meal while I began thinking about my next steps. The murderer was apprehended, but who was the accomplice? Okay, there's something seriously wrong here. My head pounding, I stumbled out of the diner when I got another report. There had been a murder at 302 Fitzgerald Center, just one floor down from the last. Could it be the accomplice? I once again returned to Fitzgerald Center, only to find the entire floor had been locked down. Using the vents, I was able to bypass the security and approached an officer posted on the floor. I figured since I'd caught Miriam, they would be open to cooperating with me. Yet they immediately resorted to violence, drawing their weapons and chasing me around the floor. I tried to reason with the two officers stationed here, but to no avail. They clearly had orders, and those orders were to kill me. I thought this was the end, but... somehow, the security doors had opened. I sprinted past the cops, pried the elevator doors open, and leapt down the elevator shaft. I landed, bloody and bruised, and began limping away. Why were the cops attempting to kill me? Before I could think about that question any longer, I stumbled and collapsed on the side of the road.
Wake the fuck up, samurai. We have a city to burn.
Making the mother of all omelets here, Jack. Can't fret over every egg.
Well, my name isn't Jack, but you make an excellent point. Thanks to the voices in my head, I made a startling realization. If the cops were trying to kill me for getting too close to these murders, maybe they were in on it. The murders were clearly just a symptom of a greater disease. If I was going to root out the corruption in this city, I was going to have to go to the very top. My starting point? The one who gave those cops their orders, of course, the chief of police. I made my way to Town Hall, climbed the stairs, and broke into the police station HQ, sneaking into the back office and began reading their files. There it was, the file on Police Chief Ava Huber, and more importantly, her address. I armed myself, using the money I earned from capturing Miriam to buy some equipment and armor, and set off to her address. Chief Ava lives in a high-rise on the 12th floor of Shang Tower. I made my way to her address and bashed my shoulder into her door. but it didn't budge. Her door was reinforced, and I just wasn't strong enough to break it down. However, I had just acquired something Avo could never anticipate: schizophrenia. I summoned Senator Armstrong, and he slammed through the door. I charged into the apartment, baton raised, and began to bludgeon Ava over the head. She quickly crumpled to the floor, bleeding profusely, and I handcuffed her. When she came to, I started asking her questions about the murder, but she began babbling incoherently. I may have hit her too hard. After treating her how I treat all mentally handicapped people, I smashed her window and made my escape, leaping out of the 12th story window, out into the night. Who am I? Just a homeless man with schizophrenia, attacking government employees completely at random. My reasons? The voices said so. And what's so wrong about that? The voices may not be real to you, but they are certainly real to me. Before we go, I just want to give a quick shout out to this month's Patreon supporters: Disaster of Steel, The Stranger, Reds, Doc, Dinamite, Black Garden, Lady Corvia, Hobbs, Luke Strobel, and Joaquin Prieto. As always, thanks a ton, guys. I seriously couldn't do it without you. And I'll catch y'all next time. Oh, by the way, next video is Warhammer.